once again. This is Russell Lewis.
And Nadia Basich.
Today we're going to be doing a separate special from our usual weekly podcast about Breaking Bad. Today we want to specifically talk about the drug industry and crystal meth and how Breaking Bad portrays those and how they compare to realistic effects and how it is living with an actual drug addict.
Russell and I have family members who are drug addicts, but they have been recovered.
Thankfully.
Yes.
So anyways, now, for the most part when people watch Breaking Bad, I believe at least early on in the show, most people are rooting for Walter White, who is essentially the anti-hero of the show. Now, people are free to follow who they want, but in a show as realistic as Breaking Bad, I believe that some young people will look up to Walter White and be motivated by his bad actions. Especially young teenagers who, I know in our area, I personally know a lot of friends who do sell drugs on the side, because they're not able to get professional jobs. And I believe that watching Breaking Bad, as great as the show is and how much I love it, I think they're taking the wrong ideas from the show, and they're in fact inspired by the show. And what do you think about that, Nadia?
Personally, when I watch this show, I just love Walter. I mean, even though he is the anti-hero, but when I watch him, he's just gotten away with so much stuff, but it's so, cool, and I think kids do get the wrong message of watching Breaking Bad because Walter is the protagonist / antagonist, and they think it's going to be the wrong message.
Yeah,
it's not okay to do it, but it's just cool on the show.
Yeah, honestly, I'm kind of unbiased as far as, my favorites on the show. I'm not, fully sold like Nadia is. I just love the good story, and whether or not Walter gets away with it or not, I'm on board. So what do you think, Nadia? Do you think this is going to affect young teenagers, or do you think it's already affecting young teenagers, how they feel about selling drugs now after watching Breaking Bad?
I'm sure everybody knows somebody, at least one person who sells drugs. I think it does affect a lot of people, especially vulnerable kids. I want to say teenagers. It's the same thing. People are just going to keep selling drugs. It's just how the world works. It's not going to stop, and it's going to keep continuing.
Right. I know. Absolutely. I know, I had some friends when they started watching the show initially, the idea is oh, Walt's such a badass. And I remember when they started really getting serious about selling weed, it was simple drugs, weed, ecstasy, that they were almost oh man, now I'm like Heisenberg, you know what I mean? And that was really scary to me. Even at that time, I knew how bad, how really Walt was suffering. He didn't do this for the fun. I mean, in certain parts of the show, yes, he did. But a lot of kids, they don't see the negative in what Walt does, how it's affecting his life. They don't see how it's destroying his family, how he now has to go on the run, how he's had to kill so many people. They look at all the other aspects, oh yeah, he's making money. Oh, he's a bad guy and he gets away with it.
Right. I know kids just sell drugs just because they want to sell drugs, either because they have no money or to be cool or whatever the case is. Walt is doing this because he has cancer, he's dying, he doesn't know what to do, even though it's a bad idea to do it, but I don't think anyone sees that he's doing it for his family, just in case he does die for whatever reason, either being killed or because of the cancer. He wants his family to be stable.
Either way, I just like to say that even though the show is definitely entertainment and it is my favorite TV show of all time, it does have very realistic implications to it.
Oh, yeah.
That's honestly the only thing that worries me about it. So anyways, another big aspect about the show is we're talking about, it's not just about dealing drugs. The show also deals with addicts as well. And we've seen several different forms of addicts on Breaking Bad. We've seen those who are essentially the strung out junkies who, we might see in a public service announcement with their skin falling off after only 3 months of using. And then we also see the people we honestly don't really consider addicts. Jesse, Skinny Pete. We see them, obviously they use the drugs, but we don't consider them, quintessential addicts to the drugs. Even though I think in reality, if they were portrayed, they would be absolutely addicts.
Yeah,
you agree?
As far as Skinny Pete and Jesse go in real life, I mean, I can't really say much because I'm not an addict, and I've never been an addict and never will be an addict. I can't really relate because if you're not an addict, you're not going to understand what they've gone through. Russell and I have been through a lot with our family members who's used drugs, and, the stories that we've been told, I can't relate to that. I can't understand what he's going through. So it's just kind of really hard to say unless you're an addict.
That's a really good point. So anyways, visually, because we've both seen it, how do you think that addicts are visually portrayed on Breaking Bad? Kind of misleading, a little over the top at times?
I think it's a little over the top at times. I mean, I've lived with an addict before, and it's not nearly as bad. Not as bad. I had no idea this person was using in our own home. So at the same time, I don't know. I think I do know. It's just way over the top. Way too over the top.
You know, one thing I like to mention is, in my situation, I feel like the drug addict that I lived with I feel like he was actually a really intelligent person.
Yeah.
He made good decisions. He supported our family. Other than when he got to his midlife, he was a really respectable human being. And when he went through that period, he came out of it. He went through it, did a lot of damage. Although when he came out of it, he more or less came out the same person, I believe, at least so far as I've seen. Maybe a few changes here and there, but after so the person I'm speaking of actually is my father. He's about 3 years, I believe, sober right now. It was a transition, getting him back to the person he was before he was an addict. For the most part, I think he's there. There's a few things of him where of course he's also a lot older as well, so he has to deal with that too.
Yeah.
So anyways, and I feel like my father was not someone you'd expect to be an addict. He was financially sound when he was sober. He was able to afford a house. Although once he became an addict, he went into humongous debt. And in that sense, it changed him. That affected his brain. Although now post effect, he's come back. He's still a great worker. He is a really intelligent mechanic. Knows cars as well as anyone else I've ever known.
So when you found out your dad was an addict, like, how bad did it affect you? Like, what kind of things did you go through?
Honestly, I was so young, and I kind of just kind of glided over it all. As the name of a Breaking Bad episode, if I'm going to quote an episode, I just kind of glided over it all. So, once it happened, I just didn't see him for a while. I got closer to my friends. I had a dog at the time. I just gotten a new dog. And that's pretty much how it was for me. Now when I look back at it, I can see, wow, there was very strange moments going on in my life. Although now when I look back at it, it's much easier. Fortunately, I had good distractions at the time.
Yeah, you were really young too.
I was very young. Well, I was early teenager.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't that young,
Still a little naive,
yeah,
I guess,
definitely, definitely.
so.
I just didn't dwell on it, essentially.
Yeah, that's good.
So anyways, the family member you had, I know his addiction was a lot more recent.
Yeah, he's a year clean. I'm 20 years old, and when my family member started using, I was about 10 years old, so essentially like second or third grade. Had no idea he was, big corporate businessman. I guess you could call him a functional addict. But later, and maybe I was about 16, 17, I started to notice a lot of change in him. He always was out. And that's what I noticed. And especially that I was a teenager, I was always out too. So I was like, cool, this person's out, I'm out. I'd come home. He would never come home. So I never really questioned it. But then as time went on, I had a lot of family problems. I moved out. My family member had to move in with me. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment. I wouldn't really stay there as much because it's just a 1-bedroom, and I just stayed at my boyfriend's house for like a couple of days. I came home one day and I just noticed all of my stuff was rearranged. Found my promise ring that my boyfriend gave to me was gone. And then that's when I knew. And that morning, my family member came, knocked on the door. I opened it and I just saw doped up. And that's when I knew. I was just like, forget it. Because my other family members were accusing, so-and-so, he's using drugs. And I just thought, no, he's not. This person, yeah.
I felt the exact same way.
Yeah, I just denied everything.
I did not believe it.
Yeah, and usually when you see tweakers, they're usually skinny, 100 pounds, just nasty looking, there's scabs all over their face. But my family member, he's 400 pounds, really tall, did not shed 1 pound. So how am I supposed to know? You know what I'm saying? Because I always thought his tweakers as just skinny, disgusting, gross people.
Yeah.
You know? So, and then from there, it's just been clean ever since. And he's never been happier, honestly.
Yeah. Thing is that while we're on this, we might as well bring up how the rehabilitation works.
Yes.
Yeah. I know for my father, when we sent him through rehab, the first few tries really did not work. We tried everything. We went, to the best clinics. After that, that really failed. Essentially, he had to go on the lam for a really extended period of time where I didn't speak to him, never saw him. And he had to find his own rock bottom on his own. And I think that's pretty much what all addicts have to go through.
Yes,
you know what
definitely.
I mean? And so eventually he came back, fortunately. He's able to find a job. Luckily, in this economy, he's able to find a job that he's good at, gets paid decently, is able to support my brother and I for school. And yeah, so I think that's essentially a success story for an addict. In fact, now we both watch this TV show together.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool, I think. He's able to tell me a little more about, when we do see scenes with addicts, stuff like character Jesse, he could tell me the accuracies, the inaccuracies of each character. It's not that we watch it because it's about meth. We watch it because we both love the show. It's an amazing TV show.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
incredibly entertaining. It's highly intelligent. Brilliant writing, and that's the whole reason we watch it. We don't watch it because of the meth. I'll admit, I introduced him to the show. I was a little hesitant at first.
Yeah, so was I.
Yeah. I still kind of feel weird about it because we, at least my father and I, we never really spoke about his drug addiction very much, and it's once we watched it, he was able to open up more to me about it, and I think it brought us closer together, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Same here. I introduced my family member to Breaking Bad, and I want to point something out. You cannot force somebody to go to rehab. It's just something that person is just ready for. If they're not ready for it, they're not going to go. You can't push someone and just be like, here, I'm sending you, you're going. They're going to come right back out the next day, and they're going to sign themselves out and just keep going to do what they got to do. So I just wanted to point that out. Once they're ready, they're ready. And I definitely encourage people to go to NA meetings. I go to NA meetings all the time with my family member. I've learned so much stuff, even though I can't relate and understand what the hell you were thinking. It's such a learning process, and it's just a good way to listen and just to understand. And there are support groups out there. And there is no difference between AA and NA. It's the same thing. They're both drugs. And there's Al-Anon and Narconon groups for the support. And they're all over the South Bay.
So anyways, if you guys have any comments, please leave us some messages. You can send us to our Twitters at ECC Union Russell.
At ECC Union Nadia.
Anyways, so I'm Russell Lewis.
And I'm Nadia Bassich.
So please tread lightly.
And keep cooking.